Hello and welcome to Make It at the Library from Idaho Commission for Libraries. And I've got a panel of folks here today, and we're going to talk about AR and VR and how it's being used in libraries across Idaho. So we're going to do a little round robin first, where everyone's going to share a little bit about how they've been using augmented reality and virtual reality in their library. And then we'll have some discussion questions afterwards. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass it over to Jeff to let us know what you've been doing at Salmon Public Library with VR.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Jeff Strouder, and I do work at the Salmon Public Library. I think it's best to start kind of our VR journey and kind of end where we have ended up. We started, like most folks, with just a VR headset, corded VR headset in a room with a lot of patrons kind of doing kind of consumer Beat Saber and other games like that. And we figured out how can we get something like that into maybe a more educational sense, because that's something I've always do with every tool that we have, whether it's a 3D printer or makey-makeys or something like that. We definitely want to take VR and put it in more of an education sense. So we started to look at how we get VR into the classroom, and we thought about doing some anatomy stuff and anatomy work with some of the teachers. We thought about doing some ecosystems and comparing our local ecosystems to external ecosystems that they couldn't necessarily visit. But eventually this all kind of made its way to a collaboration with our local museum. And we thought about how can we get VR done in a historical sense? Can we tell a story and really capture a part of Lemhi County's history and kind of marry that with some artifacts that we might have at the museum? A project called Ghosts of Gilmore that we kind of developed with some high school students and some senior projects. And what we thought about was using something, I don't know if people have, but I've kind of just brought one, but this is like a simple kind of panoramic 360 camera. This one in particular is the Insta360 1X, and essentially just takes a 360 degree view when you place it down. They use these a lot for virtual tours. So we were going to do a kind of a virtual tour of our local ghost town called Gilmore. But then could we go a step further? Could we make this interactive in some way? Could students go through this experience almost like a video game, because we saw how into Beat Saber and things like they were into that, and say, can we teach history at the same time? So that's when we kind of elicited some high school students to act this project. We wrote out a script. We got all the artifacts. We've brought them down to the site, and we actually kind of did this VR experience that was going to debut at a Smithsonian exhibit called Crossroads at our museum, and have the whole community be able to come in and experience that. It was also thanks large in part to the ICfL and their take-home kits for the VR headsets, which they sent us, and we were able to have multiple stations and people use those at one time. But I think best me to stop talking and maybe just show you a little bit of what I'm talking about so the viewers can have a concept. So I'm just going to share my screen now so that you guys can take a look. And hopefully you guys are seeing, is that good? Getting nods. So I'm going to put the sound on. So this is what you could view as a desktop version, or this is what you would be experiencing if you actually had the VR headset on, which is more realistic. Up here in the corner is how you would toggle to get it to the VR headset. So you could do this with any VR headset. But essentially, when you look, this is the 360 camera. As you turn your head, you would be able to turn around and see different aspects of Gilmore. Kind of the cool thing that we tried to do was be able to edit in actual, so that when a user selects on something, you have this interaction between these characters that are telling the story. And you can kind of work the experience, go to different spots. This is the old mercantile building, and there are historic artifacts all around which are created hotspots. And each one of these hotspots is an actual artifact, like this ballot box from Gilmore, and it tells you about the ballot box, how it was used. And there's just random things as you look around you can click on, lantern, you know, etc. And as you go through your story and you go meet these characters that you can click on, they tell you to go find certain artifacts like a game. And once you find those artifacts, it will teleport you to the next part of the story. For example, this first one, just as a quick one, is this pocket watch that's on the ground, which kind of highlights this nice and gives you this nice jingling. And that would transport you to the next portion of the story. So that's kind of the tour in itself. And then over here, you have the ability to learn more about the characters and maybe watch a video of how we made this project. And then this is the actual virtual tour software. So people that are interested in something like that, you can come in here and you get to look at every panorama, and then you get to add basically our hotspots. So this is the video hotspot that I added, and you can kind of highlight different things that you want to happen in that virtual tour, which is pretty cool. And then lastly, I'll just kind of give you some images here. These are from the actual event that we did, and had 3 stations set up. These are some kids that are doing it. This is all the wonderful information that ICfL sent as far as what's in their kit. Allows you to explain what the risk is for participants, which is really nice. I thought it was great because we didn't have to think of all that information. What else we got here? So we had a nice little poster here that just showed what the project was. And then finally, like again, I showed you on that side clip, like if you do click on it, this is the actors inside the actors studio, and they kind of go through this whole project, and we walk through some of the backstory of what it took to make something like that. So essentially, that's kind of, our VR project and how we kind of took it to the next level. And hopefully something like that we can share with like the Historical Society of Idaho, so more people can actually view Gilmore from wherever they are. They don't actually have to live in Salmon. So that's kind of my story.
That's awesome, Jeff. Thanks for sharing. That's really inspiring to see what you were able to put together. And I really like how you got the community involved and really found a story that, that was meaningful for folks in your local community. Yeah, I look forward to seeing how we can share that out with folks across the state. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Sherry up in Donnelly.
Hi, I am Sherry, and my VR experience is fairly limited. In 2019, pre-COVID, we had our summer reading, which was a space theme, a universe of stories. And we decided instead of doing a big prize, we would do a space camp. And our space camp was going to be awarded to 20 kids, and it was going to last 3 days, and it was going to be this super fun interactive adventure that would include all of the really fun things that they had done all summer, like let off rockets and explore space in a new and exciting way. And so we got the VR headset from ICfL for the culmination award. So the last thing that they were going to do was going to explore the International Space Center. And I'm going to quickly share my screen. So we went all out for, the kids had costumes. We ate on the Space Center, which was the playground at the school. And so they had space food. That was their least favorite part because they had dehydrated food that they had to rehydrate using a solar powered water heater, which was did not work quite well. But in the end, the big award was exploring the Space Center. And so they got to come back to the library and do virtual reality. I knew nothing about it. So I know I have very little tech knowledge, and I'm horrible at teaching STEAM, I always say, because I don't know anything. But it's so funny being an accidental librarian, how quickly you learn that you can teach a lot of things that you had no knowledge of before. And the kit from ICfL, you literally open it up. It has the directions, step by step, how you do it. It comes with all of the worksheet, not worksheets, but the sheets of what you need to do, what the rules each kid needs to follow. It comes with cleaning wipes, and that was pre-2020. It comes with all of the instructions that you will need, even if you have never touched a VR. So the kids got to dive into it that day, and the only problem that we had was kids were fighting because they were not getting long enough time on the machine. So we did it right here in our library. Our library is really small. Our occupancy is 16. And so one of the biggest difficulties for us was just mapping out enough space for the activity. So that was the biggest problem with us. Afterwards, we don't do like written reviews for our programs. We allow the kids to make videos. We feel like it better allows them the opportunity to clearly express themselves. And so we just set up a video with the iPad, and they can go over and review the program. All of the kids on their review that made it to Space Camp, their number one thing was that they got to use the VR. The experience of it, the feel of actually being in space was pretty incredible. And we have a little virtual reality headset here, but it's one of the cheapy ones, and that you put a phone in, and it was not the same experience. And so these kids really got to feel it. They got to reach out and touch it. And the only thing that it lacked when it was done is the only question the kids had was, how does space actually smell? So
I love it.
Yeah, it was great. So, and that's it. That wraps me up.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. I love the idea that you were having participants, their reward was an experience rather than stuff. I think so often the go-to that libraries fall back on is the idea of giving people stuff as rewards. And it sounds like you created an amazing experience for all of those kids to have at the end of it. I can confirm, I had the opportunity to have Steve Swanson, who is an astronaut, try the International Space Station app, and he said it was surprisingly realistic.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think I've also heard that outer space smells like burnt toast. Has anyone else heard that? I feel like that's something I've heard.
Interesting.
Yeah. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Julio over in Eagle Public Library. Tell us what you've been doing with AR and VR.
Yeah, hello. So my name is Julio. I'm a programming specialist, so I put together workshops, classes, and events for our library. I do kind of have a background in 3D development, both with my degree and just as a hobby. So I did feel very blessed in the fact that my superiors allowed me to kind of explore this passion of mine. So I've been developing a mobile VR app of our library. It's 3D modeled after our blueprint. I'll show it here in just a second. It really kind of brought to mind the idea of like virtual libraries and what kind of solutions they can bring. So I feel like the libraries that are already connected with like the Libby app or the Overdrive apps, different ways to just get libraries on your phone. In a sense, that is a virtual library already. But when we bring in the word reality, virtual reality library, it kind of opens up other ideas, right? VR being a really good discovery tool, as many of us use it as like making it available for kids to kind of entertain themselves. Beat Saber, we talked about consumer products. But on an educational level, I did want to look at ways to make it VR accessible. So that's kind of why I'm gearing more towards just the mobile VR app where you could just download it onto your phone and then engage with the content. So I'll just go ahead and share the screen here. These are just some screenshots of the current, one of the renditions of it. So before I just started with modeling the blueprint, even putting the bookshelves in, but then I kind of asked, if it's a virtual reality library, do we still need bookshelves? And so we were kind of exploring with the idea of not. just taking them out. And these are just kind of very early prototype versions of it. So these kind of installations would be interactive books perhaps, or the top 40 titles of a certain genre or category. We do have our library in sections, so familiarizing our patrons with those sections could be a good thing. So it's really important to kind of consider like what the intent is behind creating a VR experience within the space. So one of the things that we are going to be doing is creating like little learning modules within these kind of kiosks. So the users would kind of teleport throughout the space on their phone, and they would walk up to these kiosks. Maybe one is about some historical knowledge, maybe some scientific knowledge, like about dinosaurs, and they would tap or click on these like kiosks that would have some sort of preview content on them, and then some sort of animation would take place, or audio, or some type of experience that they would be rewarded with for engaging with this piece. So that's just kind of like the direction we're heading with that. We did have some experience pre-pandemic in 2019, and dealing with like VR and AR stuff, just having it available, doing some activities. But I think now that things have shifted, we're looking at trying to just reintroduce VR, but in a new way. So yeah, that's kind of just my spiel on that.
Great, thanks for sharing that. Super intrigued at the idea of creating a virtual version of the library for folks to interact with, and I like the idea that you're cognizant of people's tech limitations, and that making it something that would be usable across various platforms, I think is a great way to hopefully get more people engaged with it. I look forward to seeing where that goes. Next up, I've got some questions I'm going to ask our panelists about their experiences with VR, some things that they're thinking for the future, and of course, always the one thing everyone always wants to know, which is what I'm going to start with. What's one thing you wish you'd known when you started using AR, VR at your library that you've learned in the process of using it? So I will start with Julio.
Being kind of young to the library world, I'm a year in public library service and 3 years in university libraries. But definitely what surprised me was the willingness to explore new technologies and ideas. I found it very enlightening and empowering, just for someone such as myself to just be able to not only bring access to give access to other people of these emerging technologies, but explore them ourselves. So just the willingness was a surprise to me.
Great. Jeff, what's one thing that you wish you'd known when you started using AR and VR at your library?
Maybe not a popular answer, but how long it took to set up at going. Now this is back in the day of, again, a little bit more running it off of a laptop, but needing to basically book a room that I could then set it up, and then finally get some kids in there and use it, and then break it all down. It was almost like a full program, which took a lot more of my time, but fortunately VR has progressed since then, and now there's like the Oculus Quest, and there's a little bit easier ways to manage that situation. But that's probably how much time it would take of mine to just get this experience into the library.
That's a good one. Sherry, what's one thing you wish you had known?
How great I was at Fruit Ninja. After the kids played, I took it home before I brought it back down to Boise, and I played Fruit Ninja, and I was like the Cobra Kai of Fruit Ninja. But no, for real though, I wish I would have realized how many different games were on the actual laptop that comes with the system from ICfL, because even though I borrowed it with a purpose, and my purpose was for the kids to experience the International Space Center, I would have loved to have let them enjoy a few of the other components of it. When I had it at home for the night, my dad did the virtual tour of Alaska and saw the bear and the salmon in the stream, and he loved it. And I did, obviously, Fruit Ninja. But there was so many games on it that not only were good for entertainment value, but there was some great things for like senior citizens who might need to get a little movement in, but not be able to actually go to a gym or things like that. Just at Upshall this last week, there was a class on how dancing decreases the symptoms of dementia. And I'm like, we could implement VR while these people are at home if they could just check one of these out, and we could do get some movement going in some of these older people. And so it was those components I think that I wish I would have known ahead of time, so I would have explored them a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And so the kit that you're referencing and that I think Jeff was referencing was one where there was a collaboration that we were doing for a while with Idaho Virtual Reality Council. And so there's that kit, and then there's a kit that we have separately from ICfL that has a Quest and a couple of Oculus Go's in it. And so we do have some varying levels of tech that folks can borrow. But yeah, I love the idea of that movement aspect, and I could see where us making folks more aware of what some of the different experiences are on there, having like maybe a menu to give you an idea of which ones might work for what scenarios would be a good thing to have. Which is a great segue into my next question. What are ways VR might be used, promoted, or shared safely with your community in the middle of a pandemic? So are these things that you have thought about? And what are your thoughts? I'll let whoever has an answer ready to go jump on that one first. Sherry, you kind of touched on that a little bit, the idea of lending them out as a way for older folks to get some movement into their everyday activities, especially if you know, gyms or the Y aren't open, community centers might not be as accessible. So could be a way to bring that into their home. I like that.
Well, I think that's an important aspect that libraries have to like consider right now, not just in obviously VR, but just in general, is the elderly population and their accessibility to other things, not just libraries. And when those other things are limited, how can the library step in and fill that gap? And I think we always need to be thinking about that, whether we're experiencing a pandemic or not. I think that libraries constantly need to be realizing that we are there for our communities, and how do we fill those gaps?
Yeah, I think being that, you know, that it's best to limit people inside libraries in certain, at certain libraries, of course, thinking about constraints and needs. You know, having, and I'm just referencing this, like bringing VR to a mobile app and making it super accessible. A lot of people are missing the idea of browsing. And so if virtualizing browsing is an option and is something people are willing to accept, then maybe it could be an alternative to leaving your home rather than, you know, making it a health risk kind of variable. Just a thought.
Cool. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on how to safely share, use, or promote VR use in the middle of a pandemic? Nope.
The short answer is no. I really don't. I don't know. We're trying to, not saying it's not possible, and I'd be open to people's ideas and love to feel how somebody can do that in a safe environment. We're really trying to limit the amount of sharing of our equipment and right now. Now, you did bring up a point which I could see if we put a barcode on our headset, we're able to check it out so we know it just stays within one family unit, and then we can come back and kind of do the sanitation thing like we would with books. That might be a possible avenue which we could explore. just like we do with some of our other higher end equipment, projectors and things like that. But it's, in terms of it in the same way we were using it within the library space, it's just not a reality at the moment for us.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. The idea of, I think that speaks to a lot of programming struggles that libraries are having right now in the pandemic, is how to migrate them from how they had been doing them and still provide that service and that experience to the community, but in a safe way. So yeah. What's one thing that, or what is the one thing that most surprised you about the experience that you shared and using VR and AR with your community?
I guess I'll jump in. The thing that surprised me the most was, well, it didn't surprise me that our older patrons were hesitant to use it because it is a new technology. It was more of their reaction after they used it, that it wasn't as foreign or so weird that they couldn't get into, and actually were quite excited about it, not only for maybe the next generation, but even themselves, that they were proud of they could actually do something like that, I find, because there is often this limitation with scary new technology that they don't want to kind of jump in. But having at least our experience, which was a local history experience, they wanted that carrot. So it kind of forced them to engage with this new piece of technology, which they found wasn't as scary after they did it and understood the whole concept of why that piece of technology exists in the first place and what you could potentially do with it. It may not just be a video game that's kind of curved the minds of the youth, so to speak.
Jeff, I like that your that historical experience you shared had the alternative of like using the keyboard and mouse as opposed to the headset. I did kind of experience, and I have seen this throughout just my time with VR, is the amount of people that have motion sickness versus not. It does kind of depend on the experience, whether there's moving objects around you. Oh, just noticed my hands. That can kind of create that feeling of motion sickness. So if it's kind of a stagnant scene that you're able to teleport to and control yourself, maybe it does help alleviate that a bit. But creating the alternative, I think, was a good idea.
Just quickly add into that, yeah, that we had a desktop set up there with that whole experience for just that purpose, for people that just wanted to opt out but still didn't want to miss out on that level of engagement.
Overall, that's one of the best practices with VR that we recommend, is to have a variety of ways for folks to engage. So whether that be you're able to cast or connect to a screen so that people, if they just want to have a passive experience and just see what the person in the headset is seeing, that's one way to go. And having kind of like periphery, back when we were able to have face-to-face programming, have periphery exercises and activities that are happening. So that way, while folks are potentially waiting in line, there's still something for them to be doing that is also still relevant to the overall experience that you have planned for them. Sherry, do you have one thing that was most surprising about the program that you offered?
I think the thing that surprised me is the vastness in people's opinions about it. I had one little girl who was completely inspired, loved it. She's going to be an astronaut and I can walk in space, and I was totally inspired and will definitely go into a STEM field because of her experiences with Space Camp and the VR primarily. And then I had a young boy who felt the nausea and felt that kind of like motion sickness with it. And he absolutely wanted nothing to do with space afterwards. He is not interested in anything further. Right now we're doing this Mars base camp with 4-H, a 4-H partnership. He wants nothing to do with it. He remembers what it's like. He went to Mars. He doesn't want to go to Mars. So he wants nothing to do with it. So I think that that's also something to consider, is it's not for everyone. And having those options, those keyboard options, those other additional options, we did not offer those. And so I do think that those are important. But I think for me, it was just the shocking, like, every kid's going to love this, just like every kid loves going to Disneyland. But not everyone loves those big scary rides and at Disneyland. And I think for some kids, that's exactly what this was. It was motion, not having control. There at one point there's debris flying at you. And so I think that vastness in opinions was shocking for me.
Mm-hmm. And insightful, and some great information to kind of reflect on. Yeah.
Can I just add something to that experience? That first student you spoke of, the young girl who wants to now be an astronaut, who just couldn't get enough of that. I mean, we had something similar here as well, and I don't know if it was surprising, but it was, I guess, engaging for me as a informal educator. Is we had a young student do our experience and could spout out facts about Gilmore that you would never have imagined. I mean, he ran through the experience 12 times, could tell every other person where to go, when to go. And for me, that was just another kind of indicator of maybe kids don't learn how we learned growing up. And, you know, we often read via textbooks, and that's how we got our information. And maybe this is a new way to engage them. And they want to learn, i.e. the space student girl who really wanted to become an astronaut after that. So
I think that's a great point, Jeff. And there have been a number of, in my experience working with makerspaces and STEM education and libraries, there have been many times where I have gotten to work through an activity and had the thought in the back of my mind of, gosh, I really wish that I had had this when I was little, and maybe I would have ended up going into some different route if I had. So I like that that those are opportunities we're bringing forward for the next generation. My last question for everyone is, what is one thing you're excited about AR and VR and the future of it? So really broad. So this could be either specifically what your plans are, in general, something that's happening with the tech or the industry. What's one thing that you're excited about for the future of AR and VR?
I'll go ahead. I mean, certainly the new developing technologies become cheaper and more accessible, which is good. Smartphones are more powerful and also getting cheaper, so enabling better VR at your fingertips. Some of the future things that I'm looking forward to, we are looking at partnering with a organization called the Autism Mixed Reality Institute. So we're going to be looking at, you know, really good, maybe activities and spaces that individuals on the spectrum can actually benefit from, because there are instances where VR is more beneficial to them in certain formats. And so I think that's going to be really fun and empowering for not only myself, but other individuals to look into 3D development, because one of the partners of the Mixed Reality Institute, not only the Idaho Virtual Reality Council, we have Jim Bradbury there, but Marcus Nigrin with Blocksmith, who has developed a platform for quick and easy game development. So my hope is to hopefully empower future individuals to maybe, if they like VR so much, maybe they want to develop it themselves, and they can do it quickly and easily through our partners. So definitely exciting things.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking forward to the fact, I mean, just here in this panel, you have one that's talked about a journey through history, and then one who Julio is speaking about journeying to the future, literally being able to browse your shelves at a library virtually. So I think those two things right there is what makes VR so cool. You can literally take a step back into the past and learn about history in a really cool interactive way, or you can take a leap forward into the future and browse shelves at a library. How cool is that? Like, I mean, that is super cool. And the fact that we have two librarians here in Idaho working on these super cool, inventive things to do with a little pair of goggles is super cool to me. And I think that is an awesome testament, not just of VR, but for our libraries in Idaho as well. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, is I'm looking forward to taking a step back into the past and also leaping forward to the future, all on one machine.
I love it. And it is really surprising when I speak with people from other states. It's surprising to them to hear about how much is happening in the VR and AR industry in Idaho. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for libraries going forward, hopefully, to partner with some of those organizations. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I think the thing I'm kind of looking forward to, especially nowadays, we're in this kind of COVID pandemic and people and schools and education is kind of doing this transition to online, and we'll see how education happens going forward because of this. But something like VR can really complement educational sense like that, giving us the ability in the future potentially to travel to places that we would never afford to do so. It might actually be able to lessen some of the gap that is happening and get people exposed to more things. I'm pretty excited to see kind of VR goes. I think it has an opportunity to actually make us more connected when sometimes people look at it as, oh, now you're this thing on and you're disconnected. So I think there's a way to look at it from a way more connectedness, kind of moving forward.
Yeah, VR can be a great tool for developing empathy as well. And so kind of getting at that connection and connecting with environments and people that are maybe not folks that you have the opportunity to engage with one-on-one. I agree. I think there's some really great potential there, and I too am looking forward to that. Any last thoughts or something that you wanted to say that none of my questions or you sharing about your experiences with AR and VR at your library before we let everyone go?
I guess I'll just add one thing just because it's an opportunity to. I would say the librarians or other educators or whoever is watching this, take the opportunity to try to experiment with it, use it, and see if it makes sense for your organization and institution. Don't look at it from the standpoint that I'm not a techie, I can't do this, I can't engage with this. There might be an opportunity for you that you didn't previously know to bring it in and actually complement what you're already doing.
For sure. And
If you can't figure out anything else, you can at least play Fruit Ninja.
right. And I think that's a great point. And I know that people, I can't remember who it was, but someone kind of made the reference to of games corrupting the minds of young children. And people are welcome to have that opinion. Using VR, though, is a way to also engage with new technology and help folks expand their understanding of what is possible. And Fruit Ninja is a game, yes, but it also is exercise and develops hand-eye coordination and all sorts of great stuff that that's the sneaky parts of a lot of these experiences, I think. And I want to thank all of you, the panelists, Julio, Jeff, and Sherry, for joining and being willing to share your knowledge and experiences with staff across the state through the Make It program. And I look forward to seeing what participants do with their newfound understanding of AR and VR.